Have you heard of a woman named Margalit Fox? I hadn't until recently. I don't know her, but I recently read a great memoir piece that she wrote. You see, Margalit Fox recently retired from her beloved job of 24 years. She began her career as a copy editor at the New York Times, and then she moved on to writing obituaries for the Times. And as Fox explains, I never set out to write obits. No one does. She writes, the child has not been born who comes home from grade school clutching their notebook and then says, when I grow up, I want to be an obituary writer. Fox explains, and I say in her words, that in the summer of 1994, she joined the New York Times as a copy editor on the Sunday Book Review. She writes, it was a marvelous section awash in smart, lively colleagues and enticing, tottering stacks of books. Sounds awesome, right? But she says, I pined for a writing job. And as my years on the copy desk wore on, I feared my own epitaph would say little more than, she changed 50,000 commas into semicolons. She writes, so I began writing advance obits, assigned by Marvin Siegel, then the Times obituary newsletter. It's a Sisyphean task of obit editors to stockpile advances for as many of the newsworthy undead, I didn't know that was a word, as possible. And when Marv took the job, he commissioned a blizzard of them from colleagues throughout the newsroom. In the coming years, writing in my spare time, I would produce dozens. And then she writes, in 2004, when a staff job opened in obits, I raced to apply. To his everlasting credit, the editor took a chance on an unknown copy editor and let me, she says, become, a woman well in my 40s, become a cub reporter. The joy Fox took in her work is apparent, right? She explains, writing obits only reinforced what I had long suspected. It's the best beat in journalism. The reason is simple. In following the subjects from cradle to grave, obits are the most narrative genre in any daily paper. Think about it, entire story. For a writer, there is little better than being paid to tell stories. Fox explained her story in a recent memoir piece that ran in the Times. It was her last piece as an obit writer. She's alive, don't worry, but she's completed her tenure. She's started the piece and said, I'm writing my own sort of obit, but not because I'm dying. She told her story, writing down what she had in effect written, but not really written, with her life, like what she wrote with her actions and her speech. She now wrote that story. I read that piece a few weeks ago, and it stayed with me, made me think. Think about it. Telling stories, reading stories, hearing stories, it's a thing, right? I mean, we all like different kinds of stories, perhaps, but we all love a good narrative. It draws you in, you want to know what's happening. Some of them are fiction, some of them are fact. We're all drawn in by a captivating tale. And when such stories are real life, well, they're interesting and even inspiring. We can read the stories written by reporters like Fox that tell of high-flying adventurers, amazing patents, motion picture heroes, great legal victories, incredible romances, and so much more. They pique our interest, and they're fun even, to a point. The risk in these stories, though, when we read about these famous people is that, well, we get caught in others' lives and compare ourselves to them to a fault, falling short next to those who maybe created the Etch-a-Sketch, wrote a novel a year, traveled the globe, made a Wall Street killing, collected incredible art, or funded how many scholarships with a posthumous donation to their university. We could fall short in comparison and get stuck. But wait, there's a Hasidic story that many of you may know, we've told it over the years, talks about a man named Zusya. Zusya constantly compares himself to Moses. And no surprise, right? If you compared yourself to Moses all the time, well, he falls short time and again. But before his death, he says, in the coming world, they will not ask me, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why were you not Zusya? In other words, why weren't you true to yourself? The story, of course, reminds us that we can look to Moses and the rest of the folks with big names and big headlines, but in the end, we have to be the best selves we can be. We must live with integrity and honesty. This week in Torah, the Torah portion Ki Tetzei, right, Ellie? We read an incredible litany of commandments. We read about caring for captives at war, how to respect the body of your enemy who you impaled on a stake. I don't recommend that one. How to pay your workers overnight. Pay them immediately. Don't make them wait for their wages overnight. We read about fulfilling family responsibilities, caring for the poor by leaving the gleaning of the fields, maintaining honest weights and measures, that is, having honest business practices, and so much more. As I read the portion, another one caught my eye. Some mitzvot that actually I often tend to read and keep going. There are a few mitzvot in the portion about vows, about keeping our commitments. We are commanded in Ki Tetzei not to put off fulfilling our vows. It says we must fulfill what has crossed our lips and perform what we have voluntarily committed. Torah says, since we made the promise with our own mouths. Making the promise with our own mouths. So here we are in Elul, the time of reflection preceding Rosh Hashanah and the days of awe, the month before. Well, that's precisely what these days are about, considering our commitments. What have we promised to do with our own mouths? What have we promised others? What have we promised ourselves? What have we promised God? These are the days to begin our contemplation of the year past and determine where we would like to make change as we begin a new year. Zusya did it. Margalit Fox did it. Both can inspire us to change in those ways, right? Zusya changed his perspective, realizing that he had to be true to himself. And Margalit Fox, fearing that her epitaph would say, right, it would say little more than she wrote, she changed 50,000 commas into semicolons, rewrote her life story by changing what happened in it, what she did with her life. She set out not only to write the stories of others, but to rewrite her own story through her actions. So here we are, 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. We still have time to change. Yeah, rabbis and cantors don't need to hear we're 2 weeks before. We all have the time to change. We can change our perspective, like Zusya. We can even rewrite and retell our story by changing our actions and our words. We can change how we fulfill promises in the story that is our lives. We can begin by asking ourselves, what have I promised in the year coming to a close? What are my commitments? What is my story, and am I living it the way I want it to be? Or do I want to rewrite my story with my words and actions? For let's be honest, even if we are utterly happy with our lives, we all can make change in the new year. We all can begin to rewrite the chapter for this year, 5778, the year drawing to a close. So let's do it. Indeed, let's do more than make commas into semicolons in the days ahead. Shabbat shalom.